The wall that started a war. When I first bought the old hillside property on Maple Ridge, I knew the slope behind the house was a ticking time bomb. Every heavy rain sent small slides of mud creeping closer to my back porch. The soil was soft, the hill steep, and the HOA. Well, they didn't care. So, I built a retaining wall. It wasn't a small project. I spent weeks designing it, making sure it was reinforced with rebar, drainage pipes, and solid concrete footing. It wasn't meant to win beauty contests. It was meant to hold back a mountain. But the moment the wall went up, the HOA descended like vultures. "Mr. Peterson," said Karen, the HOA president, clipboard in hand and disapproval written all over her face. "This structure is an eyesore. It ruins the neighborhood aesthetic." I stared at her, still covered in cement dust. "It's holding up the hill. You'd rather the dirt slide into your flower beds." She ignored the sarcasm. "You didn't submit an architectural request form. This violates Section 4B of the community standards." I told her I'd rather fix a safety hazard than wait 6 months for a committee to argue about wall colors. That didn't go over well. Within a week, I got 3 violation notices and a threat of a $1,000 fine. They said the wall had to come down. I appealed, showed them the engineering plans, and even had a licensed contractor sign off on its safety. But Karen didn't want logic. She wanted control. The HOA board voted unanimously. She told me smugly at the next meeting, the wall must be removed within 30 days. I refused. That's when things escalated. My mail started arriving late. Neighbors stopped waving. Someone even spray-painted "ugly wall" across the concrete one night. Still, I stood firm. As the weeks went on, I noticed the rain clouds building more frequently over Maple Ridge. The soil was soaked from the constant drizzle, and the ground began to shift again. Cracks spread along driveways and sidewalks, creeping like veins across the neighborhood. Karen was too busy planning the HOA garden party to notice. But I did. I could feel the hill behind my property pushing harder against the wall each day. The weight of that mountain was terrifying, but the wall held. And deep down, I had a sinking feeling that very soon, everyone in the neighborhood would find out just how much they needed that eyesore. The storm that changed everything. The weather alerts started pinging my phone early that morning. Severe thunderstorm approaching. Flash flood warning in effect. Normally, I'd shrug it off. Maple Ridge got heavy rains every year, but this storm was different. The radar showed a swirling band of red stretching for miles. By noon, the wind was howling through the valley like a freight train. Sheets of rain hammered my windows so hard that visibility dropped to almost nothing. Water gushed down the street, swirling around the curbs like miniature rivers. I ran out to the back deck, raincoat soaked through in seconds. The hillside looked like a waterfall. Mud, rocks, and debris were flowing straight toward my retaining wall. But it held firm, no movement, no cracking. Just solid resistance against nature's fury. Across the fence, though, I saw panic. Karen's pristine backyard, once a showcase of manicured hedges and stone pathways, was turning into a swamp. The drainage ditch sheet, fought to keep decorative, was now clogged with leaves and runoff. By evening, several neighbors gathered outside, yelling over the roar of rain. The storm drains were overflowing, and mud was sliding dangerously close to the homes at the bottom of the hill. Karen came sprinting toward me, drenched and wild-eyed. "We need help. The lower slope is collapsing." I grabbed my flashlight and boots, ignoring the irony. The eyesore she wanted gone was now the only thing holding the upper section of the hill in place. I led a few neighbors behind my property, where the wall towered like a fortress against the torrent. "Your wall. It's actually working," one neighbor shouted through the downpour. I checked the drainage outlets. Water poured out in steady streams, just as I'd designed. "It's doing its job," I yelled back. "If it fails, though, half this block goes with it." Lightning split the sky, and a deafening crack followed. A section of the hill near the community playground gave way, sending a surge of mud down the path. It missed the wall entirely but buried the HOA's flower beds and gazebo. Karen stared in disbelief as the rain turned her perfect landscaping into a muddy wasteland. All night, I stayed awake, monitoring the wall with a flashlight and a shovel, clearing debris from the drains. By dawn, the storm finally broke. The sun rose over a battered neighborhood, but my wall still stood tall, solid as ever. Karen's yard, meanwhile, was destroyed. The HOA president who'd once called my wall an eyesore now stood in front of it. Speechless. The look in her eyes said it all, reluctant respect mixed with humiliation. But deep down, I knew the real test wasn't over yet. The wall had survived one storm. The question was, could it survive what came next? The HOA's apology and their new problem. The morning after the storm, Maple Ridge looked like a disaster zone. Branches littered the streets. Mailboxes were half buried in mud, and several homes had flooded basements. But the biggest surprise? My property, thanks to that ugly retaining wall, was bone dry. Neighbors who once glared at me during HOA meetings now walked by with wide eyes and nervous smiles. Hey, great job on that wall, one said awkwardly, still brushing mud off his shoes. Even Karen showed up, though she looked like she hadn't slept. Her perfect hair was a frizzy mess, and her expensive gardening gloves were caked in dirt. She stood in front of the wall, clipboard in hand, but without her usual confidence. I have to admit, she began, her voice quieter than usual. Your wall prevented a lot of damage. We're grateful. Grateful. That word almost made me laugh. But before I could reply, the HOA vice president, Jeff, jogged up looking alarmed. Karen, we've got a bigger issue, he said, waving his phone. The lower slope by the community path is still shifting. The geotech report says it's unstable. If it gives out, it'll block the main road. Karen's face turned pale. That can't happen. The county will fine us. I folded my arms. You ignored the warning signs. I told you months ago the hill needed reinforcement. She didn't argue this time. Instead, she sighed, looking defeated. Can you help us? Maybe show us what you did here. I almost said no. After all the harassment, fines, and sleepless nights, I owed them nothing. But I couldn't stand by while the rest of the hill crumbled and took homes with it. Fine, I said. But we do it my way. No committees. No red tape. Karen nodded instantly. Agreed. By afternoon, I had a small crew of neighbors hauling gravel, sandbags, and drainage tubing. I explained how to divert runoff, how to compact the soil properly, and where to place barriers. They listened carefully this time. No one questioned me. As we worked, I caught Karen watching me. There was no hostility anymore, just guilt. You were right, she finally said. We were more focused on appearances than safety. I'll make it right. That surprised me. By evening, the slope was temporarily stabilized. The road was safe, and for the first time since I'd moved to Maple Ridge, the HOA actually thanked me publicly. They even suspended my fines. But as I stood beside the wall that night, looking up at the rain-darkened clouds still lingering over the hills, a deep rumble echoed in the distance. The ground beneath my feet trembled slightly. The storm might have passed, but something far worse was coming. The night the hill finally gave way. 2 nights after the storm, the air still smelled like wet earth and rain-soaked leaves. The weather forecast said the worst was over, but nature had other plans. Around midnight, I woke up to a low, eerie rumble. At first, I thought it was thunder rolling in the distance. Then I heard it again, closer this time, deeper, like the growl of the earth itself. The house creaked, a glass rattled off the counter, and my gut told me something was very, very wrong. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to the back deck. The beam cut through the fog, and that's when I saw it. The lower section of the hill, near the community path, was collapsing. The ground had liquefied into a river of mud, sliding toward the road below like a brown tidal wave. Dear God, I whispered. I sprinted to wake the neighbors. Within minutes, lights flickered on all over the street. People poured out of their homes in panic, barefoot, carrying kids, shouting names. Karen stumbled toward me in her robe, clutching her phone. The road's gone, she cried. It just disappeared. Get everyone uphill. I yelled. Stay behind my wall. Don't go near the slope. The ground shook again, a deafening crack echoing through the dark. I turned just in time to see a massive oak tree tear free from the hillside and tumble downward, taking fences and garden sheds with it. The wall groaned under the pressure, but held. Neighbors huddled together behind it, terrified but safe. The mudslide roared past, sweeping through the lower section of the neighborhood. Cars were half buried, fences gone, lawns turned into sludge. My wall, my eyesore, was now the only barrier between disaster and dozens of homes. We watched helplessly as nature unleashed its fury. Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The roar faded into silence. replaced by the sound of rain dripping from the trees and the faint sobs of shaken neighbors. When the sun rose, the damage was clear. Half of Maple Ridge was buried in mud, but everything uphill of my retaining wall stood untouched. Later that day, county inspectors arrived. One of them studied the wall closely and whistled. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. It saved the block. Karen stood beside me, quiet for once. She turned to the inspector and said softly, "That would be him." The HOA dropped every violation, of course. They even asked me to help redesign the community's drainage plan. I agreed, on one condition, that they finally learn the difference between ugly and essential. That night, as the sun set behind the repaired wall, I couldn't help but smile. The same neighbors who once called it an eyesore now called it something else. A lifesaver.